All right, 8th grade. Here's what I did when I was filling out this plot diagram for The Monkey's Paw, written by W.W. Jacobs. So you start over here and you fill in the title. So it's The Monkey's Paw. I'm sure you did this already. And the author is W.W. Jacobs. Okay, so if you're going to write a summary about the plot of this story, you're going to need title and author. So you put it there. When I'm filling out the chart, I always come over here to the beginning of the story and start with the exposition. So I wrote that the setting was the White's house in a small English town, which is what it tells us at the beginning of the story. So there's the place setting. They do say that it is a cold, stormy night. So I kind of thought that that would constitute the situation. And the characters that I think are most important are the Sergeant Major Morris. So I'm abbreviating because these are my notes, and you can do the same thing when you take your notes. Mr. and Mrs. White are in the beginning of the story. There's Herbert White, who is their son, as you know. And you may have written in your exposition that there was this fakir who is the guy who put the spell on the paw. So if you put that there, it's fine. Now you know that he's not actually a character that shows up in the story, but he's discussed a lot. So if you put it there, I get it, and it's not incorrect. Okay. So after the exposition, you know that the conflict is usually described. So we talked a lot in the notes and the review that we did last week about the different types of conflict. And I'm going to say that the major conflict in this story is man or character versus fate. Okay, and so I feel like that comes from the fact that we have Mr. White, who wants to keep the monkey's paw, and then the monkey's paw itself is the thing that's causing all the problems, right? So if you think about who the protagonist and the antagonist are in the story, Mr. White, you could even say Mr. and Mrs. White are the protagonists, and then it's the monkey's paw that is the thing that's causing all the problems, or what we call the antagonist. And so you can see that this arrow links these two things. So protagonist and antagonist, who versus who, and that helps you determine the conflict. So that's my thinking on that. Okay, so after conflict, you move to rising action, and these are the things that complicate the story or provide suspense in the story. And since this is a horror story, I feel like the things that I included here really kind of build the suspense. So I have a few things that I wrote. If you didn't write all of these things exactly, it's okay, because you know that when you're reading a story as a reader, you feel it's normal and usual that you are going to pick out different types of things. We always want to stick to what you feel is the most important, or the things that are happening that move the plot forward. Okay, so here's how I did it. So I felt like in the beginning of the story, I wrote that the Whites get the paw, they get the monkey's paw from their friend, the Sergeant Major Morris. So he comes to visit them, and he brings this paw, and he says, yeah, here's this paw. It's got some magical powers. So I wrote also in here, I'm writing in here, that the paw grants the 3 wishes to its owner. To the owner. So he's transferring ownership. So the Whites are given the paw from their friend, the Sergeant Major Morris. And so it's important to note that they get 3 wishes if they are the owners of the paw. Now, right away, it's pretty clear in the story that the Mr. and Mrs. White, they're kind of doubtful about this whole thing. They're like, oh yeah, sure. It's not really a big deal. So I wrote here that one of the things that kind of moves it forward is that they're not really serious about it. They kind of doubt that the paw can do anything. So the thing that happens after that is that Sergeant Major Morris, he's like, oh yeah, it's really serious. It's so serious that I'm going to throw this paw in the fire. So I wrote that in here as one of the major things that is moving the plot forward. So Sergeant Major Morris throws the paw in the fire. Because he's like, oh, no, 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 no. You shouldn't have this. It's dangerous. You know, 3 wishes, that could be bad. And he throws that in the fire. So, of course, Mr. White gets it out of the fire, and they make a wish. So the Whites wish for money. And you may have written in here that they wrote that they wished for 200 pounds. Herbert says, hey, yeah, we could use that wish to pay off the mortgage, and they do that. So I just shorten that and I say that the Whites wish for money, which they do. Okay, so the next thing that happens is the next day Herbert dies at work. So he is killed in an accident at work. Okay, so they wish for money and then continue on to the next day. He's killed at work. So his company gives them money. So Herbert's company gives the family, they actually give him the money that they wish for. Even though they don't wish for him to die, they end up getting the money because their son dies. So it's not what they wanted, but it is what they wished for. So the last thing I put in here is that Mrs. White, as a result, she wishes for Herbert to be brought back, which makes a lot of sense. So she's very sad that her son has died, so she wishes for him to be brought back. And that's kind of where I put the rising action, because the suspense is building and it's continuing to get complicated. Okay, so I felt like the next thing that happened is that we have the climax. So you guys know that the climax is also the turning point. Sometimes you've had teachers who have said, oh, the climax, that's the turning point, that's when things change for in a big way. So here, after Mrs. White wishes for Herbert to be brought back that night, there's a knocking at the door in the middle of the night. There's a knock at the door, in the middle of the night. And this is where kind of like you know that this is a horror story, or it's in the genre of horror. So it's the middle of the night, it's quiet, there's a knocking at the door, and at this point, Mrs. White, she wants to open that dang door. Mrs. White wants to open the door no matter what is on the other side. And Mr. White, he kind of panics there. Okay, so remember that she wants her son back. And this is actually not the next day, it's about a week after Herbert has been buried. Okay, so this is a big turning point, because what happens? Mr. White, in the falling action, Mr. White wishes for the noise to stop. So they don't know what's on the other side of the door. And so at this point, the reader kind of guesses or infers that it was Herbert knocking at the door, back from the dead. At least that's how I read it. Herbert at the door. Okay, so the third wish, and remember that there are 3 wishes that go along with the monkey's paw. The third wish definitely disappoints Mrs. White. She's very upset that they don't open that door, but Mr. White has panicked. So she's disappointed. Third wish disappoints his wife. But if it is Herbert, the third wish sends Herbert back to his grave. And I think that this is more peaceful than if they had opened the door to their son Herbert, who's been dead for a week and who knows what condition, because remember that he died as a result of an accident at work. All right, so after the following action, you get the resolution. So I'm writing that Mr. White, the resolution is that Mr. White uses his 3 wishes, but to his sorrow, he loses his son, even though they didn't wish for him to be gone. They wished for money, but they got the money as a result of his son's death. They lose his son and disappoints his wife because she wants to open that door. So it's all bad. All of it's bad. Because remember that the Sergeant Major Morris, he says the paw's really not really something to mess with, you know. So, and that's where I go back to this idea of the conflict as man versus fate. So we have the character that decides to kind of tempt fate, or maybe he doesn't even consider what the fate may be. But the resolution here is not a real good one. Mr. White loses a lot, and so does Mrs. White, and certainly Herbert does too. Okay? And so we're going to leave it at that because we haven't discussed theme yet. But theme would definitely be the last thing. You have to wait until you've read the whole story and thought through the whole plot before you can make an accurate assessment of theme. But that's where we're going to end our video. So, bye.